This is the Meat and Potato Sports Show. Thanks for listening. This is the 7th episode of the show, number 7. Essentially, the format of the show, as you probably know by now, is a weekly format where we will recap the best sports stories of the week and keep you up to date on the sports world and its happenings. For example, in today's show, we will cover topics that occurred the week of March 26, 2018. Okay, so we got a lot of information to cover today. Let's jump right into it. So, okay, let's start off with the new NFL rules changes. First, we'll start off with the changes to the catch rule. It's a major change to the game, obviously. After we cover this, we'll kind of move into the other minor to medium rules changes that occurred that some people haven't even covered, but I found them on the NFL's official website, so I figure I'll cover those as well. Okay, so first, like I said, the catch rule. So the new rules defining a catch is just straight from the NFL. 1. Control of the ball. 2. 2 feet down or another body part. 3. A football move, such as a third step, reaching or extending for the line to gain, or the ability to perform such an act. So those are kind of the 3 clarifiers that would qualify a football move. So the main rule, obviously, the main change to the catch rule is they've completely eliminated the going to the ground part of the previous catch rule. Thank God. Now, there's kind of been a agreement from everyone that this is a great decision to change the catch rule. It was a much needed change. We all agree on that, I assume. And the one downside is we also agree there will be more fumbles. Depending on how you look at it, it's a downside or it's not. Fumbles can be exciting. It's a big momentum shift in the game. It's a big shift in the game when they occur. And without question, there will be more fumbles with this change of the catch rule. So, you kind of make your decision on whether you think that's a good thing or not. I think overall it is a good thing. The old catch rule was way too confusing and caused way too much controversy. It slowed gameplay. It made games drag on and on and on while we waited for a ruling on the catch. And then when that ruling did come, half the people who were watching the game didn't agree with it, including professional analysts. It got to the point where in the Super Bowl, the people commentating the game, you may remember, there was a ruling on a catch, and one of the commentators, I can't remember who it was, but he said, he's like, I don't even know what a catch is anymore. So let's just wait to see what happens, basically, is what he said. So that kind of personified perfectly how the catch rule had run amok and had become this complicated thing that it didn't have to be. And especially of all the rules that make overly complicated the catch rule something so important to the game, when the NFL has clearly become, without debate, a passing league. I know we all agree on that. So, yeah, it's a great thing that they made this change. I'm really happy to see it happen. The NFL.com article that introduced and announced these changes, obviously mentioned some of the controversies that occurred in the past, like Dez Bryant's catch against Green Bay in the 2014 Division Championship playoff games, which we've talked about on this show in previous episodes, and as well as the catch by Jesse James for the Steelers, which was a reverse touchdown against the Patriots, which may have had a major impact on the outcome of seeding and what have you for the playoffs. And the Cowboys' Dez Bryant catch against Green Bay was huge too. The basically cost the Cowboys the win. That they would have essentially won that game. Now anything can happen, but statistically and probability-wise speaking, that win would have gone to the Cowboys, and that's a shame to know that it had that big of an impact on so many games. Those are just 2 of them. With that being said, it was interesting to see that the votes to change the catch rule were unanimous. So everyone who had a vote was in favor of this change, which is really not surprising, but, really just reminds you how outlandish this rule had gotten. So that's really all there is to say about the catch rule for now. We'll have to wait until preseason, or really the season, to see how these changes really impact the game. Like I said, we can expect more fumbles, but I think overall it's a good thing. So, okay. Moving on, some more rules changes. So, this change was decided to be tabled by the NFL for now, and they're branding it the Josh McDaniels rule, which, quote, would have allowed assistants to be hired while their teams are still in the postseason, and we can expect this to be a topic during the spring league meeting in May. So it looks like they're going to kind of touch on this topic again, and maybe we will see it become a change in the rules, but for now it's been tabled, so we'll have to wait on that change. Another rule change that potentially could have occurred was proposed by the Jets, who placed a proposal to make defensive pass interference a 15-yard penalty rather than a spot foul. Now, a lot of people and fans are in favor of this. Analysts are in favor of this as well. I'm not sure where I stand on it myself. I kind of see both sides of the argument. But with that being said, for now, the Jets withdrew their proposal to make that happen. So we're not going to see that happen for now or even see it addressed. But yeah, as far as where I stand on it, it is a complicated rule, and I guess kind of the argument against it is, well, let's start with the argument for it first to keep it simple. The argument for it is it works great in the college game. They've implemented it in the college NCAA football, and it's working great. It's not this long penalty, obviously, because it's not at the spot. It's a 15-yard penalty. And I guess the downside, I heard someone make an argument against it that, what's to stop someone from just committing pass interference? If you get burned, say you're a corner, right? Say you get burned by the receiver you're covering. Well, if you're that corner, why wouldn't you just intentionally foul or just hack the receiver if he's 40 yards down the field, but you can still have a step on him to where you can just take him to the ground and just swallow that 15-yard penalty instead of giving up the 40-yard reception for the receiver. And that does make sense to me. I could see how that's obviously the smart play, but the people who like the rule in college say that never happens in college, which I kind of find hard to believe. And I would love to see if someone could find an occurrence of this happening in college ball, because that seems like the logical thing to do, right? If you get burned and you're 50 yards, 40 yards out there, why wouldn't you just take the receiver to the ground and swallow the 15-yard penalty, since it's not a spot foul anymore, speaking in NCAA terms. So that'll be an interesting one to see play out. I think I'm guessing we will see some kind of change to the defensive pass interference ruling in the next coming years. I'm not sure. I don't think that'll happen this year, though, because we already have the catch rule being changed. I don't see it happening this year, obviously, just because, you don't want the game to change too drastically year to year. So, but I do think it will come at some point, because, it is a flawed rule. I'm just not sure where I stand overall on it, because I could really see the argument against it holding water. So I guess we'll have to see what happens with that in the future. And so now I'm going to kind of sum up the approved 2018 playing rules and the approved 2018 bylaws. It's a list the NFL.com published, so I'll read that to you guys to keep you up to speed. So the approved 2018 playing rule summary is: number 1, by competition committee, makes permanent the playing rule that changes the spot of the next snap after a touchback resulting from a free kick to the 25-yard line. We're all familiar with that, but now it's official. 2, by competition committee, changes standard for a catch. We just covered that. I don't know why it says number 7 for the one below the one I just mentioned, but whatever. By competition committee, it authorizes the designated member of the officiating department to instruct on-field game officials to disqualify a player for a flagrant non-football act when a foul for that act is called on the field. Now for the approved 2018 bylaws summary. By competition committee makes permanent the liberalization of rules for timing, testing, and administering physical examinations to draft eligible players at a club's facility. Next, by Buffalo, for 1 year only, amends Article XVII, Section 17.4 to liberalize the rule for reacquisition of a player assigned via waivers. Next, rule by Denver amends Article XVII, Section 17.16 to permit clubs to trade players from reserve/injured. Next rule by Minnesota, it amends Article XVII, Section 18.1 to replace the 10-day postseason claiming period with a 24-hour period. So significantly shrinking that waiting period. And that's it for those. Nothing too drastic or crazy other than, major changes like the catch rule. And as I first mentioned, the touchback spotted at the 25-yard line has now been made permanent. So that's going to be in effect for the foreseeable future, obviously. And now moving on to the last potential rule change I wanted to cover. This is a proposed or a possible, it's being discussed, it's in the works, possibly. I'm being very careful with how I word it because it's not official, but they are talking about it. It is a new targeting style rule, and Richard Sherman had his choice words about it. I found a quote from him on the subject per Speak for Yourself, who got it from USA Today, and he said, quote, "It's ridiculous. Like telling a driver if you touch the lane lines, you're getting a ticket. It's going to lead to more lower extremity injuries," close quotes. So kind of funny and colorful as one would expect from Richard Sherman. I get where he's coming from with that statement, but it's obviously kind of a silly analogy and a false equivalency. But that aside, I get where he's coming from. I'm not a fan of it by any stretch, at least what they're talking about. So what are they talking about? Okay, so what they're proposing is any contact initiated where it's intentional head-first contact, essentially helmet to helmet, but intentional where you initiate contact with your head first, you're going to be penalized. Whether it's player ejections, they're saying player ejections would be a very possible scenario if you were to commit this offense. And like I said, they're considering adopting this new targeting style rule. I think it's horrible, and it would be a very big setback for the game. I think you got the NFL, who's in this tough position of trying to make the game safer and keeping the public's perception that it's being made safer and the game's becoming safer and safer as years go on and we figure out more and more. But the problem is when you start tinkering with big rules like this, you're effectively changing the entire fabric of the game, and that could be a huge problem for your viewing base. Now, some analysts are saying it's not going to have as big of an impact as one would think, which I kind of find hard to believe. Because, I guess it would depend how seriously they enforce it, right? Because you have all kinds of head-first contact that's initiated by even quarterbacks, like say during a quarterback sneak, which Mark Schlereth mentioned, which is a great point by Mark Schlereth. Because like I said, when a quarterback goes for a quarterback sneak, he goes boom, head first. So what's the deal? Is that considered head first contact? Are you initiating head first contact? By definition, clearly you are. The question is, would they enforce it for a situation like that? So I think you get into this very, very slippery slope, and we really don't know where it could lead, other than the potential destruction of a great great game that we all love. Listen, I think we've all accepted and come to realize that this is an inherently dangerous sport. You got giant gladiator-style men who were, wrestling around, banging each other's heads together, and while you can eliminate some of that, you can't eliminate the majority of it or all of it without seriously changing the game itself. Like, seriously changing it to the point where it's not recognizable to a traditional football fan. And I'm just not a big fan of that. One person proposed, I think it was again Mark Schlereth, who's obviously very knowledgeable on the subject, being a player and a lineman himself. He said, maybe the player should just sign waivers. They should just sign waivers and go in, obviously go into it eyes wide open, which the majority, I would imagine, already are. It's not like it's a secret nowadays that the game's dangerous. Maybe it was swept under the carpet at one point, decades ago or years ago, hence the settlement that occurred where the NFL paid out a settlement to players. It's not like you got years ago where you got the cigarette companies lying about evidence they had that cigarettes were dangerous. That's not the case with football now. People are aware of the inherent danger of the sport. And yet, since we all love it so much, you have even young kids and parents who are willing to let their kids play it. So, very controversial subject. I get it. I understand we want to keep the players as safe as possible, and that's obviously the utmost importance, but you kind of got to get that balancing act down where you want to keep them safe without, I'm sorry, but ruining the game. And I think they have to find that middle ground, and I do not personally think this rule is the answer to that, finding that middle ground. So, okay, now that I've made you possibly lose your lunch and scared the bejesus out of you, let's switch gears to something a little bit more lighthearted, shall we? So Kevin Love had his tooth knocked out on March 27th. No, I'm not kidding. And I realize that may not be as lighthearted as we would have liked, but regardless, we must power through it. Kevin Love had his tooth nearly knocked out. It was pretty crazy. I don't know what else to say about this. You gotta check out pictures for yourself. Words don't do it justice. No, it wasn't a baby tooth. He had a permanent tooth nearly knocked out of his mouth. He took an elbow to the face, and bada boom, wiggly tooth. So, not sure what else to say about that, but it definitely was shocking, to say the least. Moving on. So, this is an unfortunate story. I was really bummed to see this, and my heart goes out to the guy. So, we have Isaiah Thomas, who is scheduled to have hip surgery this week, scheduled for March 30th or 31st, I believe. And the one upside is it's going to be a cleanup surgery, so it will be orthoscopic, which is, as you may or may not know, a less invasive form of surgery, which means a shorter recovery time. And he should be ready by training camp. So they're saying he's slated to be returning by the time training camp starts. But nonetheless, still a bummer that he has to get some cleanup on that. And it's really, to me, just a reminder of how his body was beat to crud while playing for the Celtics. And, whether he knew it or not, or whether they let him know or not, we don't know. But it's a shame to see that his hip is still a problem to this day after that long of a recovery time. While it does make sense because, the hip, when you injure your hip like that, that's a very serious injury. We weren't expecting it to be a light injury, to say the least, but still, it's a shame to see him still dealing with that hip because he's really been playing some great basketball these last couple months, and I think the Lakers, myself included, to be completely honest, were really impressed with his production and how much he was contributing to the success they were having when they did have success, but that's a whole nother issue. So let's move on now to the last depressing injury I wanted to cover. Well, this may be depressing, but not so surprising, I hate to say at this point. I really do. We got Lonzo Ball, who is injured once again. This time it's his knee, a contusion to his knee, which is essentially a fancy way of saying a knee bruise. He bruised his knee, so he's out for the near foreseeable future. Not sure at this point how many games that's going to keep him out, but okay, am I completely out of bounds here to say that he's missed a lot of games this season, especially for a rookie? I don't think I am, considering he's missed 26 or 27 games this season in his first season, which is not a good thing. And I think that's, an argument we have to really consider against the one and done ruling. This isn't, in Lonzo's defense, this is not the only rookie we've seen miss a large amount of games in his rookie season. There's a couple others that are kind of in the same boat this season. So, it's a tough situation, because I get it. You're young, you want to go into the league and start making some money, but is that really what's best for your body and for potentially your future and your overall career? I mean, what if all these injuries have an impact in your overall health and your body's chance to recover from future injury? The human body can only take so much. I don't know. It's a tough situation, and I totally see both sides of it. If they want to enter the league, that's their right. They should be allowed to. So I don't think that should be changed. But at the same time, I really think it's worth a second thought for these young men entering the league at such a young age. It's really something to consider, because we've kind of seen a trend, as I just pointed out. Not trying to take shots at the kid here, but it'd be intellectually dishonest to not point this out, because it's staring us right in the face. But with that being said, what do you say we kind of remove this dark cloud of depressing stories and move on to something a little bit more lighthearted and exciting for a particular person, that being James Harden, who is still the favorite to be MVP. And with that being said, there are some naysayers, some, dare I say, diehard fans of one LeBron James who are still arguing that it's his year for MVP.
A week ago, LeBron publicly stated, I would vote for myself for MVP. So LeShannon and all the blind witnesses out there started saying, I will vote for LeBron. I will vote for LeBron. LeBron told me to vote for LeBron.
Zombies are back.
They're all back. They're back. And you're the leader of the LeBron zombie.
Now, I don't agree with that. I think you can make a decent argument for LeBron James deserving MVP. But with that being said, let's consider just a couple things that I thought of that I wanted to point out. And no, I'm not going to use the tired trope, it's his time, because there were other seasons where he deserved it and didn't get it. No, I'm not going to rely on that. That's a weak argument and doesn't even deserve airtime. What I am going to point out, though, is that James Harden is in the West, a obviously much, much more difficult conference compared to LeBron James, who's in the East. And the second thing I'd like to point out is their respective teams' success. You have the Rockets, who have had a great season. I mean, just this whole season basically dominating, for lack of a better word, the whole time. And then you have the Cavs, who were, leaking oil at some points, and their proverbial car was kind of puttering down the road there for certain stretches, to the point where they needed an entire roster overhaul to stay afloat. I feel like those two things are huge arguments against LeBron deserving MVP over James Harden. I like LeBron. I like the play he's had this season. He's been spectacular. I just feel like James Harden is a notch or two above that play, mostly for the reasons I just mentioned. So you diehard LeBron James fans, hold on to your foam fingers for just a second and hold your hate tweets for now, because like I said, he's played spectacular. I just feel like James Harden deserves it a tiny bit more, shall we say. And now with all that being said, I believe it's a pretty great time to kind of segue into my next brief topic I wanted to cover, which is, man, the Rockets, are they red hot or what? And it's coming up on the near perfect time to be doing so. They've got momentum. They're looking great. Chris Paul and James Harden are as spectacular as they have been this whole season. That's a duo that some doubted before the season started. I believe the doubters were proven wrong. And if they keep this pace up, they are a serious threat to the Golden State Warriors in their current state. Even if the Golden State Warriors weren't in their current state of shambles and injury-ridden debauchery, I would still say we have to take the Houston Rockets very seriously. And with all that being said, I think we're in for a real treat this year's NBA Finals, and in some way or another, I just have a good gut feeling it's going to shape up to be a very competitive and exciting to watch 2018 NBA Finals. Okay, so this is as good a time as any to change gears once again back to some NFL stories, the remaining NFL stories of the show. So Le'Veon Bell wants to be paid a salary similar to Antonio Brown. No shocker, right? I mean, we've been hearing him talk about wanting to be paid more and to be signed to a year's length contract. So not a huge shock to see this quote come up in the news, but regardless, it has to be covered and mentioned because he is hammering on that. And in a lot of ways, I believe rightfully so, he's earned it for his play. But on the other end, I also see the Steelers side, which there still is some of that uncertainty there. And they are well within their rights to kind of hold off for as long as they want to until they back up the Brinks truck with a guarantee. And when I say guarantee, of course I mean football contract guarantee, which isn't really a guarantee at all, but kind of like I totally pinky swear that I'll pay you this contract for X amount of years, but if I don't want to, then I won't. Which I'm not a fan of at all, but that's a whole nother topic that needs to be discussed in terms of truly guaranteed contracts. Moving on to the next brief topic, I just kind of wanted to keep you guys in the loop. I saw a story, I believe it was on FS1, I believe it was on Speak for Yourself with Cowherd and Whitlock. They were discussing how new pro football leagues are slated to surface in 2019, which will be here quicker than we think, as always. And they didn't delve into it too much, but that's pretty exciting, and it'll be interesting to see what sets these leagues apart from the current NFL. And on a kind of a side note, I know that I believe Vince McMahon, a while ago was discussing the XFL and how that is likely to resurface, very likely to resurface. I believe it's close to a certainty, if not a certainty. And that XFL will be a more traditional, family values-minded league, essentially, is what he was pitching, devoid of as much controversy as humanly possible and just focused on the football. So, another exciting prospect, to say the least. And we can only hope that it does a better job this time around than it did the first time, especially considering they're going through all the effort to bring it back to life, shocking it with the defibrillator, if you will. That's a good use of that sound. I wasn't expecting that. Anywho, let's change gears back to an NFL story. This one happens to be about the Patriots. So I'm going to first read you a quote, and then I'll kind of give you my take on it and what I think of the situation and in regards to the quote. So, okay, the quote is from Josh McDaniels per the Boston Globe per Speak for Yourself. And Josh McDaniels said, quote, "I wasn't 100% sure what the future was. I just hadn't had any clarity on that. So where did I fit in? Were there any plans? I just didn't have much clarity on what my role was here moving forward. Once I heard from Robert and Bill on that Tuesday, it just gave me a reason to pause and consider this whole situation," close quotes. Okay, so what do we take from that? I think it's fairly safe to say something was offered to him in that final meeting that took place where they were able to entice Josh McDaniels to stay as the offensive coordinator of the Patriots. And no, I'm not just referring to the huge pay scale bump he saw in his salary. I think it was much larger than that. Someone that talented, money, most of these guys, money's a very, very good thing, and it kind of indicates what your status is as a coach or a player. But to these guys, there are things that are far, far more valuable to them, like a wink, wink, and a nod, in my opinion, in this case, to Josh McDaniels, that he will be the next head coach of the Patriots once Bill Belichick leaves. That's right. I'm making the prediction. I think he's gotten as much as a wink and a nod that he will be sliding into Bill Belichick's DMs when he leaves. Not his DMs. I'm sorry. His coaching position, rather. Oh, geez, that's embarrassing. At any rate, I think that's what's happening here, and it'll be very interesting to see what happens once Bill Belichick retires. Now, with that being said, my other take on this, and something I just wanted to bring up, is it's interesting how we have all these leaks now in regards to the Patriots. Not so much this story, because it's a quote from Josh McDaniels, which was obviously quoted to a reporter, where he gave his blessing to disseminate that quote to the media and to the general public. But I just kind of had a thought that clicked in my head when I read this quote for whatever reason, in that, wasn't it kind of interesting and odd, all the leaks we saw from the Patriots this year? I don't know what that's a cause of. What I mean is, it's hard to make a judgment as to if the Patriots are just, as I thought earlier in the season, but now I'm second guessing, if there were just cracks in the foundation of this great dynasty that we know as the Patriots, and now kind of came more to a crumble as we see all these players leave in the offseason and whatnot? Or is that just a complete coincidence and they were able to just keep all these things in-house and under wraps, and winning was a great antidote to keep the team silent as a whole? But when you start losing a couple games and then you have a loss as big as that Super Bowl loss they had, which had to crush them, is that why there's more leaks? It's no secret their season this season wasn't a perfect one. It was far from it. So did that kind of play into kind of the disharmony amongst the ranks and all the leaks that we saw this season that were kind of unprecedented in regards to the Patriots organization overall? I mean, we never saw leaks like this in the past. I guess I'm just trying to kind of think out loud and figure out with you guys why that is. Why this season was a season where we saw more leaks than ever, more disharmony than ever, and some serious questions moving forward as to their future as a dynasty and a franchise. I want to know what you guys think. I want to see your comments on this, and I really am curious as to your opinions on this matter. I've kind of laid out what both scenarios are, so I want to see what you guys think, which one it is. To kind of reiterate, I'll repeat it. So, is it just a complete coincidence that we're seeing more leak out into the media because of our social media world we live in nowadays, and just more information gets out to the public through the media more than ever, especially in our 24-hour news cycle? Or is there more disharmony in the Patriots dynasty and franchise than ever, and all these leaks and what have you are just a byproduct of that and completely expected because of that? So like I said, I would really love to know what you guys think. Please comment your thoughts on that below. Okay, now let's shove that clutch into the floor and change gears as quickly as possible. Try not to pop the clutch here. Okay, so last story of the show. We got the Masters coming up next week. That is very exciting for golf fans and even non-golf fans at this point, with Tiger back in the equation. Pretty exciting stuff. So I figured I'd kind of first go over the Vegas odds for this weekend for the Masters, kind of see where we stand in terms of who's most likely to win, according to Vegas, who usually doesn't get things wrong. So what I'll do is I'll list the top 10 or so, most likely, and then I'll just kind of list the notable names after that are below that. Okay, so starting at number 1, we have Jordan Spieth, 10-1 odds to win the Masters. Tiger Woods, also 10-1. Dustin Johnson, 12-1. Justin Thomas, 12-1. Rory McIlroy, 12-1. Bubba Watson, 15-1. Justin Rose, 15-1. Phil Mickelson, 15-1. Jason Day, 20-1. Jon Rahm, 25-1. Paul Casey, 25-1. Ricky Fowler, 25-1. Hideki Matsuyama, 35-1. Sergio Garcia, 35-1 as well. Alex Noren, 40-1. Henrik Stenson, 45-1. Matt Kuchar, 45-1. Patrick Reed, 50-1. Tommy Fleetwood, 50-1. Ian Poulter, 60-1. Louis Oosthuizen, 60-1. Adam Scott, 66-1. Brian DeChambeau, 66-1. And Mark Leishman, 70-1. So that's more than the top 10, but just to kind of give you an idea of the top players most likely to win the Masters this weekend coming up. And so, okay, I gave you that list. And then below that, some notable names that caught my eye we have Pat Perez, whose odds are 150-1 to win the Masters. Then I saw Zach Johnson, who's also a 150-1. Ryan Moore is also 150-1. Siwoo Kim is 250-1. Angel Cabrera, his odds are 400-1. And he is a previous Masters winner himself. I believe it was 2009, I want to say. So, yeah, those are the odds for this weekend for the Masters. Keep your eye out for that tournament. I think it'll be exciting. It's hard for me to go out on a limb and say Tiger's going to win. I think he'll make the cut and place fairly well. When I say fairly well, I mean, I'd guess top 10. For sure, top 33% of the field, I would say. And top 10's not that big of a leap, but I would for certainty say top 33%, so that's the top third of the field. And top 10 is a very reasonable guess. I don't think he'll win, though. He hasn't been back very, very long. I wouldn't be surprised if he won. I'm just saying if I had to place money on whether he would win, get top 10 or top 33%, I wouldn't place my money on him winning it. Although I do think it's possible, if that makes sense. Now, I know the naysayers or the haters out there, EB, what makes you qualified? We don't care what you have to say. You don't know anything about golf, you hack. Well, I do know a little bit about the sport. As a matter of fact, of all the sports that I commentate on, and I guess one could say bloviate during this podcast if you weren't a nice person. Golf's probably the one I know most about. I played competitive golf growing up, played in a lot of AJGA tournaments, which is basically comparable to the highest levels of AAU competition for basketball. I also played on the varsity level as a freshman for my high school. And, I pretty much grew up with the sport nonstop. Picked up the game at about, 9 or 10, I believe it was, when I swung my first golf club. So, yeah, I know quite a bit about the sport. At my best, I was a scratch golfer. So, yeah, I really love the sport. Really, really was a huge fan, basically my whole childhood, and then some. So, definitely qualified to speak on the topic. Just a heads up for any of you haters sipping on Haterade. And I'm not tuning my own horn here. I hate when people do that. I'm just kind of laying the groundwork and giving the heads up because there may be some shows or segments where I give some pretty in-depth analysis of particular players or tour players or tournaments or course breakdowns in the future. So I don't want to blindside you guys or have you wondering why I'm doing so and what makes me qualified to do so. At one point, I thought I'd be a teaching pro and considered myself quite a good teacher to people. So just a heads up, friendly little heads up. I love the game as much as the next big golf fan, and really one of my favorite passions in the past was helping people improve their games, which kind of reminds me, if any of you have questions about it, or how to improve your games, or shave some strokes off, or improve in particular areas, just comment below or send me a private message. I'm more than happy to help. I personally know, obviously, how frustrating the game can get, and you kind of run through periods of slumps where you're struggling and you kind of can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, or feel like you may never improve. So I'm always happy to help. It brings me a lot of satisfaction to help conquer the very, very difficult game of golf. So yeah, don't be shy. I'm always here, and not to get repetitive, but happy to help. Please, do not hold back. So anyway, at any rate, this is a good time to wrap up the show here. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you noticed that we're trying to slightly lengthen the shows as time goes on, give you some more content, some more talking points, just some overall content for you guys to chew on, just as the weeks go on here. So thanks for listening, guys. Truly hope you enjoyed this show. Keep an eye out for next week's. We're going to try to keep on that trend of a great amount of content for you guys. Please subscribe to the channel. Give us a thumbs up if you enjoyed this video/podcast. We really appreciate the support. Subscribing and liking the video goes a long way, more than you know. So we always appreciate that. Really means a lot. And yeah, stay tuned for the next one. I am your host, EB, signing off.